Okay, I don't know if you can see me. This is terrible lighting. For those of you who have been waiting, thank you. If you have not tuned in, thank you. I got some really, I'm trying to get into where there's just a lot of light. And I've been, what is it? Oh, it's 11:11. I've been trying to connect since, well, 10 till 11. So the connection is really, really slow. I even tried to post it on the phone that I was running late. So anyway, yeah, I'm a little frazzled, but 11:11, we're being activated. Okay, so anyway, now that I have tried to, why is this so bad? I don't know. And then it's backwards to boot. Okay, anyway, so let's try this again. Welcome to Aromatherapy is a Lifestyle. I'm Tammy Davis, and I am the founder of this work, Synergessence. A little bit about me. I've taken, okay, so I have over 30 years. I've been working with essential oils and have a background in pharmacology. I've studied under a number of top aromatherapists in the world, including Robert Tisserand and Kurt Schnabel. I do have an international certification, and I basically have taken Kurt's work and expanded upon it. And at this point, about ready to publish the Aromagenomics, the first version, 50 clinical trials, which includes a little memoir, my own autobiography about how I see, actually attempting to explain the value of including oils in our daily life. It's just, if you hear a dog barking, I'm going to try to be really not be startled by it. Anyway, the use of essential oils is significant, and that's the reason why I wanted to do, I kind of like this beginning intro class to epigenetics and the use of essential oils. In the program and the work that I've already released, you can definitely get a sense of this is where it's going. But the more I did videos on YouTube regarding, and even wrote about them, the use of them epigenetically is profound. And so today, again, this is, I'm going to upload this so you guys have this. But this is what they would call a methylation pathway. And the primary focus for today is this one right here, MTHFR. MTHFR, I can't pronounce, it's an acronym for the enzyme produced on that genetic receptor, and that would be the folate cycle. And this is very significant. The whole concept of the methylation pathway, or epigenetics, these are basically interchangeable words, is that this is the adaptable portion of our genome. In other words, this is exactly how the body responds to the environment, whether it be the internal environment or the external environment. And as I said, today I really want to focus on MTHFR specifically because when we can get that genetic receptor, now there's no predicting how it's going to unfold in the individual based on your own unique wiring. One of the most profound changes that have occurred in the human genome has been on the immune system that was detected during the Human Genome Project, and it was an imprint that took place during the time of the Black Plague. And I may have mentioned this before, but this is significant. This is a great example of how this light is bothering me. If I can just. Sorry. I feel like this is the strangest experience I've had with the camera to date. Anyway, so I'm going to ignore the lighting and I'm just going to talk, and that's how it's going to go. So anyway, it's a significant example of what the body is capable of doing without any human influence, meaning we did not do anything to stimulate the immune system, not knowingly. There is this thing that can be said for Ring Around the Rosie. That little poem actually came up during that time, because the people who were out in the fields picking roses and such, and were walking around with pockets full of petals, are the ones that actually survived the Black Plague. But that said, there wasn't any significant, I mean, we were not vaccinating people, is another way to say it. We were just living lives to the best of our ability. Yes, people were doing what they could to protect themselves, but this influence, this immune stimulation, if you will, caused, without realizing it, caused a change to the immune system. And that's how we are all here today, because somebody in our family line survived the Black Plague, because it was on a roll. I mean, we lost over 70 million people during that time. So to have this significant change occur without us even realizing we were doing it, without the use of a vaccination, is a superb example as to why I say working with the epigenome and understanding its function is essential. I'm looking for, these are some tests that are test results. Yeah, and everything's backwards, so I'm sorry. But these are some test results. You see the red, the green, and the yellow, right? Okay, this is a test result of people having a saliva test done, that DNA test. And so when we see things like this with the red, we automatically hear and are told that that's bad. And we recognize it as bad, right? Because red means warning, it's danger. So we see the red as bad, and we see the green as good, and we see the yellow as like, there might be something to be concerned about there. Forgive me for saying this, and so if anybody is involved with this, with these companies, it's not you, it's whoever masterminded this project, this way of presenting results. But when those are automatic cues in our mind, but the fact is, those reds, although they're called double defects, this is on the COMT gene, because they're referred to as double defects, we automatically think that there's something really seriously wrong, because this gene is turned off. And we see with the green, we see that these genes are activated, fully activated. And we see the yellow, we have one activated and one deactivated. And so, of course, when we hear deactivated, we think it's bad. Now, here's the interesting thing. A red doesn't mean that, if something is deactivated, it may be for good reason. The gene that's used to metabolize gluten and casein gets deactivated when the angiotensin II receptor is activated. So you see what I'm saying? So there's these changes that are occurring, and you might be wondering, well, when does the angiotensin II receptor be necessary? It's during times of stress, when there's a threat, and the body cannot distinguish the difference between a mental threat and a mental emotional threat or a physical threat. It cannot distinguish the difference. We have the capability to let people know, or let ourselves know that, hey, this isn't real. This isn't really happening. I'm anticipating something, or I'm worried about something, but we're okay. This is essential. I mean, there's something to be said for mind over matter. I mean, Deepak Chopra talked about the mind-body connection years ago. I'm reading another book now called Power versus Force by Dr. Hawkins that came out in the mid-90s. It also has a lot to do with the mind-body connection. So there's a lot of evidence to demonstrate that just our thoughts alone can affect the way the epigenome will function. And let's just face it, like I said, people were doing what they needed to do during the time of the Black Plague, and ultimately the immune system took hold, and there was a significant imprint. Now, I often say, and the reason why I argue, if you will, for the personalized use of essential oils is because our epigenomes have they've gone crazy as far as difference. They're as different as our thumbprints. And the reason for that is the introduction of technology between medications and chemicals and so forth. And our levels of stress have really been amped up So, and each one of us is wired differently, regardless of how similar we may look. There's differences in there, and right down to the way we think. And so with all of these variations happening around us, there's significant changes within us, and there's significant differences, even more importantly, within us. So the personalized approach is essential, even when it comes to MTHFR. Years ago, I had somebody talking about wanting me to produce a line of oil blends that were specific to MTHFR, COMT, DAO, MAO. I'm just looking at all the different ones. MTRR, BHMT, the CBS. And I almost entered into it, but they refused to give me a contract, and that was the big one. But then the second one, my hesitation or my objection was simply this, and that is that I cannot say an MTHFR issue for one person is going to be, whatever unfolds from that MTHFR issue is not necessarily going to be the same for everyone. I'll give you a good example. Okay, so here we have, all right, I'm going to do, let's see, which one is this one? So, okay, so this one here is red. Okay, that's MTHFR 677T. This one, their 77T is green. Okay. This is a better one because we have two MTHFR C677T genes red. But if you look at the way, is that right? Yeah. You can see the one has COMT issues with red on this one. It's backwards. And this one, COMT, doesn't have red at the top. So the COMT are the two top boxes. COMT, so you have red here, you've got green on this one. I'm having to get used to this backwards thing. So the point is that just because somebody has a double defect or a double deactivation from now on, that's what how I'm going to refer to it here, a double deactivation on MTHFR C677T, how it unfolds in the individual is very unique to that individual. So to produce a, this is what my initial thought was, to produce a blend that would be specific to MTHFR and try to market it to everybody was impossible. And that line of thinking was actually incorrect. It's not impossible. The challenge that we really face, and that's something that we talk about here, you may have already noticed, is a lot around the area of medications. That's what makes it impossible, not the defect itself. Now, how it rolls out really is determined by the uniqueness of the genome. Yet the MTHFR, and again, it's methyl. It's a funky. Yeah, I never really have spent a lot of time learning how to say the words, truthfully. It's just the acronyms work for me. Anyway, the MTHFR is, again, the folate cycle. I had an interesting conversation, or a brief conversation, with somebody who represents MTHFR. They are, I don't know if it's a he or she, because their social media identity is, hey, MTHFR. They are a holistic health coach, or I think they're actually they're in school right now to become a holistic health coach, but they're very, very interested in nutrition when it comes to MTHFR. And I think it's a really great starting point, and truthfully, it is part of the influence of why I'm talking about specifically MTHFR. I know I'd like to be able to teach blending at this level, and we can. The concern, again, that I have is along the lines of medications. Because while we may have, a double deactivation in MTHFR, or it doesn't necessarily mean that we're not taking medications, because ultimately what happens when the folate cycle isn't functioning optimally, we see problems with the MTRR, the BHMT, the production of SAMe, the conversion of homocysteine into cysteine begins to become slowed. There's a change that occurs throughout the methylation pathway. But again, how that changes, or how those things, what switches are activated and deactivated, is determined by the needs of the individual body. I want to go back and just say the green ones, just because they are full-on activated, doesn't mean that it's beneficial, because go back to the angiotensin 2 and the receptor, which is related to high blood pressure. That's activated. The body's deactivate the gene receptor responsible. I think it's PF4. I always miss that one up, but it's a DD and then there's a 4. I think it's DDP4 or DDPF4. But nonetheless, that genetic receptor is responsible for the metabolism of gluten and casein. And when that happens, again, angiotensin 2 is activated, then the gluten and casein metabolism is deactivated. We don't want the deactivation all the time, because then what do we have? We have gluten sensitivity, we have casein sensitivity, we have the need to go, gluten-free, casein-free, right? All the diets. We don't want our angiotensin 2 full on all the time. Again, it's in response to a stress mechanism, but we want that to become deactivated so that we don't end up with high blood pressure. So just because a green shows activated doesn't necessarily mean it's to our advantage. It's just a representation of what's going on in the body in that snapshot of a time. These things become chronically activated or deactivated based on, number one, our mindset, the way we think, and number two, our lifestyle. Through the use of these genetic tests, we've seen an advent of nutraceutical supplements that come out that are specific to these various genetic variations, including MTHFR. And again, with this person I was talking with just yesterday, they had posted something along the question about methylfolate and folinic acid. Again, this is the MTHFR cycle is the folate cycle. This is where we convert folate into folic acid for the conversion of amino acids and, for the use of the breakdown and use of amino acids. However, when I think about dating back to like the 50s and the 60s, when we started introducing processed foods, fortified foods, everything, it wasn't just supplements, it was foods that are, added vitamins to it, including folic acid. I think about the amount of changes that have occurred to our epigenome just with the introduction of that. Folic acid, while we know it to be good for us, it's necessary in the way our system functions, is something the body is supposed to produce. This is the reason why using essential oils is magnificent, because they are signaling molecules. They will actually support the MTHFR, the folate cycle. It's not 100% guarantee that the rest of the system is going to fall in place, but it will begin to ease the distress because the body's now able to use the proteins a little bit better. And, there's also a Krebs cycle that gets involved, but you can actually work with that with the use of certain oils that we'll talk about here shortly. But the fact is that the folate cycle, when we take folic acid, whether in supplement form or consistently in fortified foods, this is another reason why eating foods that have vitamins added to it, packaged processed foods. This is another reason why it's not to our advantage, is because what ends up happening is when you give the body something it's supposed to make, you're basically turning it off. It doesn't have to make it. There's no use to make all this folic acid. It only needs so much folic acid. The difference is that it's man-made, and the body doesn't respond very well to man-made. I'm going to try and, I spotted this in my book, Power versus Force. This is the book that I was talking about. And if you can bear with me here a minute. It says right here, this guy is, I believe he has something to do with orthomolecular supplements. So I'm not supporting those supplements, so this isn't a commercial for that. He's just the one that wrote the book and did a lot of studies on mind-body connection. And one of the things that, he's a PhD, so he's done, and this is extensive research in here. He says here, living things react positively to what is life supportive and negatively to what is not. This goes along the lines of what I talk about all the time, which is the body will respond to nature-made chemicals before it will respond to man-made chemicals. These vitamins that are in our foods and supplements are generally man-made. Oh my goodness. The nutraceutical industry basically is owned by, I lost a word, but it's owned and run by the pharmaceutical industry. And a lot of these scientists, it is going to come to me after I finish this, and then I'm going to feel really silly. But a lot of the people who are heading this up, these researchers and whatnot, it's just they are creating these things in lab. They're learning how to grow these, like ascorbic acid is grown in yeast. So a lot of them are grown, although they are, you know, they're harvested, if you will, but they are man-made. They are different. They are not, and the thing is like with the oils, these nutrients work synergistically. And the thing about science is that although they are studying these plant constituents extensively, they are also trying to figure out how to create the synergy, because there is a force. Hey, Janice. There's a force within nature or within the plants, and this is why when I talk about folic acid, it has to be combined with other foods. This is the reason why you don't find folic acid in nature, but you find folate in nature. So the synergy of these nutrients is far more beneficial than it is to take these supplements. And through the action of actually taking or eating foods that have had folic acid added to it, it will actually shut the MTHFR gene down. It will just deactivate it because the body doesn't need to produce it. And so for decades, we've been generating this kind of reaction. Then of course this creates discomfort. This creates discomfort, this creates inflammation, then you start to worry, and so now you have an ongoing deactivation of MTHFR. And that's the reason why I said these two. Is it that? Oh, this one. This is the one I was looking at. But these two actually have red on the MTHFR, which is, I'm on the wrong side. This thing is so backwards. This one red right here. But you can see up above, they both have red in the same area, but up above it's different. And the reason that it's different is because it's a unique, you know, everybody has a unique genetic code or wiring. So to benefit the folate cycle with oils is huge, because like I said, this woman or this person rather was asking about methylfolate or folinic acid, which are now two versions of folate that are being made in these nutraceuticals. And while you can get it, I mean, you can take it in, and methylfolate doesn't work for everybody. And there's all this speculation as to what we should be doing with supplements. And I say, if you just eat foods that have folate in them, like beets, and I mean, beets aren't always people's most favorite, but you can get folate in a number of, in its natural form in vegetables, and combine it with essential oils, you're actually ahead of the game, and you're actually supporting the MTHFR folate cycle. And once that starts to function and we're producing our own folic acid, now we can see changes that will begin to occur along the methylation pathway. The introduction of other oils for other health issues, or along epigenetically, like for CBS, which is where we produce glycine and serine, which helps to keep us calm and also produce cysteine. I mean, that does factor in at some point, but at least starting with the folate cycle is where I see profound results would actually occur. I'm going to post this, like I said, this picture here of the methylation pathway, because then it'll actually start to make sense, some of the things that I'm saying here, because ultimately what happens when MTHFR is, and one of the things that I talked about, I actually was making notes for today too. One of the things besides folic acid that causes changes to the epigenome is stress. And it is also I talked about this, it also is estrogen or environmental estrogens, not just our own estrogen, but environmental estrogens. And that could be both natural phytoestrogens as well as man-made estrogens. And so all of these create changes, and they act like estrogen in the body, which is now going to add systemic stress, which is going to, again, cause alterations to the epigenome. This is actually a good thing because it just means that the body's working. But chronically in survival mode, or activated stress mechanism, is going to increase immune activity, and this is where we see higher levels of histamine, and this is where we see higher levels of yeast, and of course it just starts to build on one another. But one of the things that's also very significant in this is this level of change that occurs also affects the CYP450 enzymes, and therefore why we're also seeing an increase in things like breast cancer, prostate cancer, lung cancer, unexplained lung cancer with people who don't even smoke, because the CYP450 1B1, yeah, those numbers are it's the CYP1B1 genetic enzyme that is responsible for metabolizing estrogen. And when that becomes altered as a result of the way the body is reacting to the stress, then we see higher levels of this type of cancer increase. Now, the interesting thing is, believe it or not, the constituent that is known to actually support the folate cycle is geraniol. And there's a number of oils that you can actually use that contain geraniol. Geraniol actually supports the function of the folate cycle. The only challenge that we face, again, it comes down to medications and how the geraniol, and that's GERANIOL. There's two forms. There's the geraniol spelled IAL, which is the equivalent of Ciprol. That's different. IOL is the one that supports the folate cycle, and to use oils specifically with that constituent based off of what else is going on in the body is a really great start, and especially given the world that we live in. An exceptional oil to include in that does not contain geraniol, but it does help with the metabolism of estrogen. And that's significant because these xenoestrogens, again, man-made or nature-made, they don't register in the body as estrogen. They just act like estrogen. That's the big difference. But they're causing changes, and it interferes with the body's ability to metabolize its own level of estrogen. So the inclusion of sandalwood, it's the East Indian, I had to think about it. It's East Indian sandalwood, has santalol in it. That's all it's basically made of, is a constituent called santalol, different forms of santalol. And this santalol is what's been found to help the body metabolize its own estrogen, and in a sense, de-escalate the amount of stress that's going on. So combining sandalwood, East Indian sandalwood, and it has to contain santalol. So when you're purchasing your oils, you want to make sure that is the constituent. That's the top three constituents. And blend it with something with geraniol, IOL in it. So oils high in geraniol would be palmarosa. Rose has geraniol in it, but it also has some blood thinners in it. So even though we like rose and it smells wonderful, if you're taking blood thinning medications, or you're prone to like hemophilia and so forth, you don't want to really use a lot of rose, but palmarosa is actually very high. Another one is, and the other thing with palmarosa is it helps with it actually helps to soothe the parasympathetic nervous system. The synergy of constituents, besides the fact that it helps the folate cycle, calms the parasympathetic nervous system, which allows for the use of acetylcholine in a more productive way rather than an excitable way, more of an inhibitory, because most neurotransmitters and hormones have both excitatory and inhibitory functions. So using palmarosa will actually assist with that as well. And of course, that enhances the digestive process. Now we're beginning to get in and be able to break down the sugars and the proteins more effectively. Mei Chang is another one. Mei Chang has geraniol. It has actually both of them. And so if sleep is a concern, which generally it happens when we do start to see folate cycle imbalances or deactivations, we start to see, because as inflammation increases, then you have sleep issues. Maybe not extreme, but they're still there. So including Mei Chang, because it contains both, but you don't want to use citrol with certain medications, including diabetic meds. So that one we have to be careful with. In fact, it's the 2B6. I'm just looking at my notes here. Another one, okay, a couple of other ideas are ambret and marjoram sweet. The reason for ambret is because it actually works, it has a significant impact. The constituents in ambret they have a significant impact on the HPA, the hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal axis. They are very good with helping to, again, de-escalate the stress response, so including ambret with something like Mei Chang or Palmarosa. And the whole, I'm just wanting to make sure that I say everything I wanted to say here. Oh, I'm glad I looked. So the other thing about geraniol, here's the really cool thing about geraniol. So oils that contain geraniol is that geraniol has been found to help in the production of glutathione. No kidding. And that is another significant process that's the reason why I wanted to really start with the folate cycle, because it does support the production of glutathione, which actually takes place at the CBS gene. However, it's the conversion of glutamate that needs to take place to produce glutathione and GABA. Glutamate is an excitatory neurotransmitter, but it also has inhibitory factors when it's converted to these other two, and glutathione is the primary antioxidant that the body can produce. So using oils with geraniol not only supports the folate cycle, it not only enhances the use of amino acids, it also helps the body produce the glutathione that will help keep the inflammation down. And if you include that with, like I said, with sandalwood, which helps to the body metabolize estrogen, then you are on the road to actually feeling so much better and not needing, truthfully, to take as many supplements. And I say that because we can spend an awful lot of money on supplements, and there's so many companies these days that are coming out with, and you don't know. If you have a double deactivation on an MTHFR gene, you may not be able to take methylfolate, and that's determined by other genetic deactivations. And that's determined by other factors that are going on in your methylation pathway. So why play a game of guessing which supplement is best for you? Because if you're going to have an adverse reaction to it, I know that I took one from, I bought myself a B complex a couple years back, and I don't remember the name of it. It was recommended by Mercola and a couple of other ones. It was a change from what I had been doing, and I was taking it because I had been under an extraordinary amount of stress. And this lighting is so bad, and I'm so sorry. But what I ended up taking it did actually have a type of methylfolate in it. I actually blew up with hives, full body hives. I got on the phone with a company, and I had to just, it was life extension. That's what it was. It was a life extension supplement. And I just had full body hives. They tried to tell me that I'd never taken B vitamins before, and it was niacin, and I was just having a niacin flush. I'm like, no, that's not what this is. These are hives. This is my fingers were swollen, my face was swollen, I had hives in my abdomen. It was a mess. So this is another reason why I advocate for the oils, because we can use minimal amounts. We know specifically how these constituents assist the epigenetic pathway, and we can make a huge bit of difference with a little bit of oil and maybe minimal amounts of supplements. That's not to say that we don't want to include nutrient-rich foods, adaptogens, or some kind of supplement in there, but I say make it food-based. If you're going to do anything, make it food-based. These man-made supplements are actually, as I said, when we take folic acid or we eat foods with folic acid in it, all we're basically doing is telling the body you don't need to make folic acid. So of course the MTHFR is going to have a deactivation on it. Of course the folate cycle is going to be struggling, because we're basically telling the body. The same thing can be said for, like, when we take CoQ10 and we take what's another one? Vitamin D. That's a big one. When we take these things, we are actually telling the body you don't have to make it. And so the inclusion of oils with as wholesome of a diet as possible actually allows for the body to do what it's designed to do. And if we know that we can affect the folate cycle at this level, then why not? Another oil, so I've already mentioned palmarosa because it soothes the parasympathetic nervous system, and that's based on the synergy of constituents, but it also contains geraniol. And so those two alone make a huge bit of difference. And the fact that geraniol supports the production of glutathione makes it great. Sandalwood, that is high in santalol, or that's made of, is basically santalol, and that's East Indian sandalwood. To include that helps the body actually metabolize the estrogen so that it supports the CYP450 enzymes. Just like I said, especially the CYP1B1, it really helps at that level. Roman chamomile, at this point, speaking of glutathione, actually supports the CBS gene. Because of the high level of angolates in it, they've been able to determine that actually supports the reduction of, or the metabolism of phenols, which allows the body to produce glutathione. This is really bad. I'll try to come. So palmarosa, glutathione, sandalwood, and if you're not taking any sort of any diabetic medications, then including Mei Chang, because again, this is another oil that's very high in, that contains geraniol and is really very good for helping to break down histamine in the system too. That tends to build up when, I mean, this is the reason why we see high levels of homocysteine, because they're not being converted into cysteine. And so those oils alone would support the metabolism of amino acids, the conversion of homocysteine, the production of glutathione, and the production, or for that matter, the production of folic acid. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. And like I said, if you start taking things like spirulina, or you eating other foods that are high in folate, then, you know, the question always comes up, what about vitamin B12? Well, if you're a vegan, truthfully, what I've done, because I've been one my entire life, is I like spirulina because it does contain a degree of the bacterium that where the B12 is produced, and it does contain some folate. So, and we don't need a lot. We live in a world right now that says, you know, with the Costco mentality, where we just have to consume so much. And I'm saying we don't need to consume that much. We can eat smaller amounts, use the oils, and the body will know what to do with it. So besides the methylation process, I wanted to say a little bit, you know, the oils are, as I mentioned, signaling molecules. And the reason I call them that, they can basically, they contain the signaling molecules. And the signaling molecule is basically something that can activate a genetic receptor. That's a lipophilic chemical. So we know that these the sesquiterpenes cross the blood-brain barrier. We know that they are able to activate the endocannabinoid system. Oh my gosh, I just did a video, I can't remember which oil it was now, that was primarily all cannabinoids. That's all it was. I'll have to make a note and then add that to the description box. But we know basically, I mean, the reason these constituents are sometimes called cannabinoids is because they were first discovered in the cannabis plant. And so of course they're called cannabinoids, but they're also called cannabinoids because they activate the CB1 and the CB2 receptors. Hi, Denise. I actually took me over 20 minutes to get this thing logged on, and then I was trying to send. I was trying to send messages on my phone, and I couldn't get onto with the internet. I'm surprised it's lasted this long, but 20 minutes was ridiculous. I couldn't. It just wouldn't let me do it. So I'm glad, and you can. And I will save this, and you'll be able to go back and. So I apologize. You've been waiting around. I appreciate that very much. I really do. So. The reason why these constituents are called cannabinoids is because we recognize their activity on the endocannabinoid system. They do affect the CB1 and the CB2 receptors. This isn't just THC and CBD. There are a number of plants that contain different chemicals that have the same activity on those very same genetic receptors. It takes a lipophilic chemical to do that. So therefore, it's very fair to say that I'm glad. So it's very fair to say that the essential oils contain the lipophilic chemicals that can activate these genetic receptors. These are also called, a lot of them are called G-coupled protein receptors. That's the olfactory system alone is a G-coupled protein receptor. And those are also activated by lipophilic chemicals. And lipophilic chemicals are sometimes qualified as aromatic compounds, although they don't necessarily have a scent to them. They're just called that because when they were first discovered, the two chemicals, benzene being one of them, has a faint aroma to it, so hence aromatic compound. But that's the reason why I'm really advocating for the use of oils and learning how to use these constituents in a way that does, we don't have to go after the whole epigenome. The thing to remember is when we talk about epigenetics, there's a whole host. I mean, I went to the doctor the other day, and of course, I'd been, because I injured myself, and then I'd been years since I'd gone, so the doctor sat there and started asking me questions, and she was trying to like segment my health. When in my head, I mean, everything makes sense. It's all chemically related. It's all wired. I mean, it's all the same system. So if we start with MTHFR and we really focus on oils with geranyl in it, and Denise, that's with a geranyl with a OL. Because there's two. Citrol is also called geranyl, but that's IAL, and then geranyl, IOL, is found in things like Palmarosa and Mei-Chang. And there's other ones, Rose. If you just look at your constituent breakdown. And the thing that I want to suggest, or not suggest, remind us of, is that while there's a lot of talk out there that the first 2 or 3 constituents of the oil are the ones we want to pay attention to, because that's going to really tell you what I've learned, truthfully, from doing the 31 days of essential oils and the 30 days of essential oils. What I've actually learned is that although we have these massive lists of properties, they are only very effective in a certain way, and the properties, well, they do get taken care of. I mean, ultimately, they're going to be relaxing. They're going to be you know, they're going to help in digestion over here. I mean, there's different things that they're going to obviously help with infections, but not necessarily because they're antimicrobial, maybe because they're actually supporting the immune system. And so by looking at that panel of constituents, I've really begun to determine that these oils are really good for very specific purposes and really honing in on that. And that's what I'm really compiling right now in writing. But that said, the first 3 constituents, while they try to say that that's the predominant property of the oil, we can't disregard the other oil, the other constituents. And I say that because there's times that you can look at a chemical pattern or profile and see that there's geranyl, you know, maybe way down on the list, maybe at 1%. But that geranyl is going to have a synergistic effect. It's going to have an effect. And so we want to make sure that we actually look at our constituents. I just gave you a list of oils to use here, but that can change based on what you have and based on what you know and what you think. But again, and just so I want to tell you, Denise, what I was saying is that Palmarosa and Mei-Chang both contain geranyl, and geranyl also supports glutathione production. And when the folate cycle isn't working properly, we do see we see an increase in inflammation. So supporting the body with an oil that contains the geranyl really helps the body helps the folate cycle function, but it also helps produce the glutathione that is necessary for antioxidant. And I also mentioned sandalwood, with the constituent santalol in it. And I want to make that distinction because not all sandalwood has that constituent. So you want to make sure you've got an oil that has santalol in it. It's basically all santalol, because the santalol has been determined to actually support the body's metabolism of estrogen, which is essential when it comes to the stress mechanism that we're talking about. And the easier the body is acting, then, you know, if we're not building toxic estrogen levels, then we're not seeing inflammation. If we're not, you know, when we don't metabolize estrogen properly, we have a tendency to see histamine levels go up. So it really supports in that level of helping to disarm the histamine levels. The inclusion of Mei-Chang actually helps to disarm the histamine as well. And then using things like either Roman chamomile or ambrette would actually be very beneficial too in the production of glutathione and helping with the angulates, especially in the Roman chamomile, for just with the glutathione production and the CBS production. So now we're talking about MTHFR and CBS. Although CBS, the conversion to cysteine, is a little bit further down the line, there's a variety of activity that has to happen in between. That combination of oils works really well together. And if we just approach the MTHFR cycle first, we've done a world of good for the body, because the body now can begin to reset itself. There may be the need to use other oils or other blends for other genetic purposes, and again, that's determined by really what the symptom is. You can kind of get, that's the reason why I talk a lot about nitric oxide synthase, because we want to be able to use constituents like 1,8-cyanol for that, and carvacrol, 1,8-cyanol are the two big ones. Carvone also help with the nitric oxide synthase. And so nitric oxide synthase is another essential one to be focusing on, because the upgrade or the level of estrogen that we're exposed to, especially environmentally, is actually going to alter the way the nitric oxide synthase works, in turn producing higher levels of hydrogen peroxide, higher levels of peroxynitrite. Hydrogen peroxide leads to premature graying, and it also leads to, this also helps the breakdown of the telomeres. I was watching something the other day, somebody was talking about aging, and the protein in the skin that causes us to lose our collagen. Well, a lot of that comes from the fact that we're producing high levels of hydrogen peroxide. And if we can support the nitric oxide synthase to produce higher levels of nitric, because the second it's producing more nitric oxide, that histamine levels go down, because that's an indication that the estrogen isn't activating it. So again, we'll go back to sandalwood. And also, by the way, Roman chamomile also supports the CYP1B1. That is the liver enzyme that is responsible for metabolizing estrogen. And it is also, this is where we see when that gene receptor complex isn't working properly, we see higher levels of breast cancer, prostate, glaucoma, and lung cancer. The lung cancer that they go, well, I've never smoked a cigarette in my life and I have lung cancer. It's for that reason. And that's, again, due to these high levels of estrogen. So I would really start at that level. I'm trying to think if there is, do you guys have any questions for me? I'm trying to, it's said a lot, and I don't want to just keep repeating myself. This is, it's interesting, on this chart they don't even have nitric, see, this is the snapshot again. They don't even have nitric oxide synthase listed on here. They have the vitamin D receptor listed on here, but they don't have the nitric oxide synthase. That usually shows up in the raw data, but that is part of that is part of the methylation pathway. As a matter of fact, this is such a strange one. Here we have it over here. It's over here in blue. I'm going to upload these so you guys can actually see it. But nitric oxide synthase is part of the whole. It's part of it, and so the idea of really, if we were to work with those two particular epigenome or epigenetic processes, is how I would say it, then we are helping the body at that point de-escalate its stress response. And that's the reason why I really think that if we begin to look at oils from a constituent profile and realizing how they're working on the genome, we can kickstart the body to actually do what it's wired to do. Yeah, so I don't know. Do you, any questions? I mean, I'm happy to keep doing this. I really am happy to keep doing this, because I could go on. I could sit here all day long and talk about this stuff. I just, very, very passionate about the epigenome. I'm very passionate about helping people understand that we have the ability to modify that. I had a naturopath one time tell me, don't ever tell anybody that the oils will actually alter the epigenome, the FDA will come after you. And I'm like, you mean don't tell them? Of course it can. A lot of chemicals can. We have a lot of lipophilic chemicals on the planet, but the body recognizes natural. If it's life enhancing, it's going to go for that first. That's just the way nature works. It's drawn to the life enhancing, and the life prohibitive. That's a second. But if that's all it has, then that's what it will react to. But this is, again, the reason why we see the body breaking down and we see so much inflammation is because these life prohibitive, if you will, chemicals are stressing the body, so the body is having to shift into survival mode. And this is the reason why we're seeing such changes to the epigenome, is because it's literally in survival mode. And but we cannot say which color on that chart is beneficial and which one's not. The red one doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. It could be to your advantage at this point because you were exposed to some chemicals. Yes, it'll be replayed. Yeah, no worries, please. Now you're experiencing my troubles too. Yes, and what I'm going to do, what I'm hoping I can do, because I've put videos on YouTube, on Facebook before, I can download it to my computer and I can share it, and I may actually put it on YouTube because it may replay better there. Does that sound like a deal? So yeah, it's a bad connection, I can tell. Okay. All right. So and yeah, so let's just plan on doing this again next week, and we'll just keep the conversation going. But I will definitely download this one, and I should say, and then re-upload it to YouTube, so that way hopefully it'll replay better. I'm sorry about the light quality. It's just been a weird technical day. So I will do that for you, and we'll pick up again next week. So and hopefully I'll be better in a better lighting situation. Anyway, thanks very much. I appreciate you very, very much. And Janice, I think Janice has left, but I just know that I very much appreciate you guys. And I look forward to being back here next week and we can talk some more. Please let me know your questions. If you want to send me questions, and that way I can, well, I'm glad. That makes, you've been a muse to me. I mean, you've really been a huge inspiration. And I just keep, and yeah, I know that. I mean, knowing that I have a partner in this just is really very exciting. So I do appreciate that. And so I'm going to tell you, if you want to just send me some questions, you can send it either here, you can post them here, or you can send it to me in an email, and that way I can kind of get an idea of what it is that you may have questions about, and we'll go from there. And I'm going to turn this off now, and then I look forward to chatting with you again next week. Thank you.